Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'd like to share with you my process of creating two paintings of a city skyline against sunset. So first, it's because it's a city skyline against the light, so it's just the silhouette of buildings. So the drawings are easy, and I apologize for the poor video quality. I was experimenting with shooting videos with my new GoPro, and maybe the light in my room was a little bit dim, and GoPro doesn't seem to perform very well under dim light. So really sorry about the poor quality, and I have sped up this drawing process. And as I always say in my videos, the drawing doesn't have to be so accurate. This is about watercolor. And this doesn't have to be so true to the reality. We are creating a painting, and this is city skyline. It can be any city. My goal in this practice is to loosen up, and more specifically, to let watercolor blend on paper so that it captures this sense of movement, which I witnessed in the museum. These photos were taken 30 minutes apart, so the clouds were actually moving, the light is changing. I'm only using 3 colors in each painting to help me loosen up. So as you can see, in order to encourage the blending of colors on the paper, I pre-wetted the paper in the part of the sky, and then I pick up some pure aureoling yellow, and then I just started to paint the light yellow part of the sky. And in doing this first painting, I realized I made a couple of mistakes, and you will see when I paint the second painting, I try to learn from my mistakes. One of the mistakes is that I went too light in my colors, especially here. I'm only picking up a little bit of the red color, which is Rose Madder Genuine, because I was a little bit too focused on matching the color that I saw in the photo. This is a common mistake when you use a reference photo, and you will see when the painting dries, it's gonna be much paler, as always. And the second mistake, as you can see here, is that the mixture I made is too dry, so the paint could not flow on the paper. So I couldn't achieve that effect I was hoping for, which is pigments blending on paper by themselves rather than by me brushing them together. So I was struggling a little bit here. And as you can see, when I tilt my board, the pigment doesn't really flow too much. And eventually I have to just use my brush to blend. Now I'm adding in Windsor blue to make the darker part of the sky. And I want to add here that there's nothing wrong with using your brush to blend the colors on paper. I've done paintings of skies in this way before, but here in this painting, I really want to loosen up by encouraging the pigments to blend on paper. And you can totally do a painting like what I'm doing right now, blending the colors with the brushes. As you can see, I also went a little bit too light with my color blue. It looks okay right now, but you will see in the end result when the colors dry, it just looks much, much paler. Now I'm going in with more Windsor blue. And it is true that you can always go in with a darker, stronger color. But the danger in doing that is you are upsetting the settling process of the pigments in between the teeth of the paper. So that's why if you keep touching it up, adding more pigment and move things around, the painting might lose its freshness and then look a little bit overworked. I didn't use masking fluid to save the space for the setting sun. Instead, I'm using a tissue to remove some of the paint while the paper is still wet. And here, apparently, I wasn't very satisfied with the sky, comparing it to the photo. So I did it again. I started to fiddle, trying to make adjustment here and there. I wish I could have resisted the temptation, because this is actually quite dangerous, since the paper is starting to dry, and if you introduce more water, and you might create blooms. But here I'm mostly using a brush to lift up some colors around this cloud to create the effect of silver lining that I saw in my reference photo. And this is the danger of using a reference photo. You just want to include everything it captures. Now I'm done with the sky, and I will leave it to dry without further fiddling, and I will move on to the water using the same three colors. Here I'm picking up the aureoling a little bit dirty in my palette. I didn't care about how pure my aureoling is going to be because the water is mostly dark. However, in the lower part of the sky, I want to keep it really bright yellow. That's why I squeezed fresh aureoling out of the tube. And I decided to leave the reflection of the sun as white paper instead of yellow, and then painting the rest of the water dark, like dark gray. You don't have to follow what you see in the reference photo. And I want that broken edge created by brushing on dry paper. It adds texture to the painting. Now I am going to mix Windsor Blue and Rose Madder Genuine to going wetting wet. Blue, red, and yellow together creates a gray. And depending on what type of red, blue, and yellow you're using and the ratio between the three colors, you can get different shades of gray. And in the next painting, I'm going to use 3 different primary colors. So this will be a very fun exercise to do. And you can even try different sets of primary colors to paint one single reference photo. And now I'm picking up a little bit Rose Madder Genuine to brushing some horizontal lines to create some more texture on the surface of the water. Now I'm checking whether the paper is already dry in the sky part. It's almost completely dry, so I decided to paint the silhouette of the buildings by mixing a very dark mixture of the 3 colors that I'm using. And you just need to adjust the ratios of these 3 colors to find the shade, the dark shade you want. And here I am using a small flat brush, which will help to paint the square corners of buildings. I think it's much easier to use a flat brush here. You just need to find the right size one that is narrow enough for the narrowest building, and with one stroke, you have that building done. You need some patience in painting the silhouettes of buildings here, and I am going to fast forward here. The reason why I did the painting in this sequence is because I want to paint the reflections of the building while the water part is still damp so that the reflections are soft, but then the sky part is dry enough so it's not too fuzzy. But as you will find out very soon, I didn't carry out my plan. And I think another minor mistake I made here is not pre-mixing enough mixture. I guess in this particular case, since the color is dark, it doesn't really matter that much. But if you are painting some other scenes, it's always better to make sure that you have more than enough mixture so that you don't end up with different shades when you're painting one thing. And also, because you have to mix more color in the middle of painting, the pigment on the paper might dry, and that's a worse consequence of not having enough mixture of color. Since the paper is drying up, I don't want to paint the reflection in right now, so I'm going to dry the paper completely now. So in order to achieve the effect of soft reflections, I have to wet the bottom part of the paper again with clear water and also go up a little bit above the horizon into the buildings. So I am using the same dark mixture and I'm switching to a round brush with a pointed tip. And now I realize my mixture is not dark enough since I wetted the paper, so I'm making a stronger mixture. So now I'm just loosely paint the reflections, and I try to vary a little bit in the brushwork, meaning some strokes are lighter, some strokes are heavier, so that you have variation and it flows, which looks more like reflections in water. And usually the calligraphy or the brushwork is where you can tell whether someone is a more mature artist or who is just learning watercolor. And this is an area that I'm working on. And here is where you kind of add your personality to your painting, because this is your interpretation of what the reflection looks like. The reflections in the reference photo definitely doesn't look like this. Now I am smoothing out some hard edges or uneven lines that I see between the buildings and the water. And this is another dangerous area because once you start minding details, it might lead to fiddling. So in watercolor, deal with the bigger picture first and then work on the details. And while working on the details, you have to fight the temptation to fiddle constantly. And I'm very guilty of that. Since the paper is dry, you can see the top of the sky has become much paler. And this is what I was talking about. If you have pre-wetted your paper, go darker than what you see in your reference photo or what you think is dark enough. I know I mentioned this almost in all of my videos, and I think every watercolor artist teaching mentions this. It is repeated for a reason because it's very easy to forget. I wish I could travel back in time and stop myself there, because once you started adding brush strokes onto a dry paper, then you saw it leaves a hard edge and then you just want to smooth out everything. Yeah, this is a lesson to learn. And finally, I stopped fiddling, and this is the end result. Let's not waste any time and get on to the next painting. So I'm fast forwarding the process of doing the pencil drawing here again. And I'm really sorry that the um, image is a little bit distorted. I think I changed the battery and then the setting changed. So it has this more of a fisheye view. Please bear with me. Also, I ran out of my art tape, so I couldn't tape the paper to my board. I would strongly advise not to do this because you will have to touch the surface of the paper, and if you just applied hand cream or have some residue grease, then it will ruin the surface of paper. Just like the first painting, I have really wetted the surface of paper, and for this painting I am going to use cadmium yellow as my yellow. And as you can see, I made a much stronger mixture, learning from the mistake in the first painting, and also putting much more water. And for red, I am using cadmium red. As you can see, when I tilt the board and brush in the cadmium red, the colors just start to flow, and that's exactly the effect I'm looking for. I want those colors dripping down, and I can achieve that using a brush, and you have to resist the temptation to smooth it out. You just have to leave it. So now I realize the cadmium red is not dark enough, so I am going with a stronger cadmium red, trying not to ruin the effect earlier. See, if you don't tape your paper, it's just so not convenient. So now I'm wetting the top part of the paper again because I need a lot of water in order for the pigments to flow down. Now I am picking up Prussian blue from my palette as my blue in this painting. It is a very strong and a cold blue. You only need a little bit and it will be very vibrant. And I am using a sable brush, so it can hold a lot of water, which is very good for the kind of effect I want to achieve. Now I'm adding more cadmium red to the blue mixture to vary it up. And I am tilting the paper to encourage the flow of pigments on paper. I'm adding a little bit of yellow to the mixture so that it's a gray to paint some of the darker clouds. As you can see, after painting the first one, my brushwork becomes much freer. And I'm still tilting the board because I want the pigment to keep flowing. And when I'm painting the darker clouds, I was really trying not to cancel or paint over the effect I was trying so hard to achieve. I think I'm good with the sky, so I will stop fiddling and then move on to the water. So I'm rinsing the flat brush and going to pick up some orange color mixture by mixing cadmium yellow and cadmium orange to paint the undercolor of the water. And as you can see from those puddles of color on my palette, my mixture this time is much wetter, learning from the mistake in my first painting. And now I'm adding more cadmium red in the mixture and trying to match the sky a little bit. Now I'm switching to a round brush to paint the darker parts of the water and the reflection. As you can see, these three colors makes a different shades of gray. And now I'm painting the reflection while the paper is still damp. But this reflection will dry out to be much paler, and I will compensate it with some dry brush later. Look at that sky. It's so dramatic. It's so cool. And it just looks like it's moving. I don't know. That's how I feel. And I went up a little bit with this dark mixture to cover the bottom part of the buildings. I think for painting reflections, it might be better to be more decisive instead of keep adding strokes. The peel of watercolor is freshness, and keep adding strokes is just gonna make it look overworked enough. I don't think that bit of white paper I accidentally left when painting the first layer of the water may makes much sense. So I went back in and covered it while the paper is still damp. I decided to paint that boat first, so I'm going to make a very thick, dry mixture. We're using Prussian blue and cadmium red, so that even though the paper is still a little bit damp, you won't become too fuzzy. And here I'm using my round brush with a very pointed tip. So back to my small flat brush, and I'm ready to paint the silhouette of the buildings. And this time I'm going to make a dark enough mixture. I don't think the paper is dry enough, so I am going to dry it with a blow dryer. And since you've already watched this earlier, I am going to fast forward again. Now I'm wetting the water and trying to paint again the reflection, because the earlier attempt apparently blends into the wash and it's kind of not recognizable. And in this painting, I have to say I fiddle much less, just a little bit. And this is the final painting. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to click like and subscribe. See you next time.